Good morning or afternoon, depending on when you're listening. Welcome to Talk HR UK. I'm Simon Geere, and when I'm not helping HR directors, MDs and CEOs find the best HR talent and recruit the best HR talent in the Southeast, I'm doing this, which is wonderful. I'm talking to HR leaders about HR matters that have been really key, particularly this year and over the last 5 years, really. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Steph South from HSBC. Good morning, Steph.
Morning, Simon.
Hello there. So Steph, you've been with HSBC for 4 years. You were at Barclays previously, and today we wanted to cover one of your areas of expertise within HR. Today I wanted to cover Agile HR with you, which I know is one of your passions and one of your areas of expertise as a business partner. So thank you for your time. Basically, talk us through your role at HSBC and how Agile has really been a part of this.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Simon. Thanks for inviting me to talk to you today. It's an absolute pleasure. I joined HSBC just over 4 years ago now as a HR business partner for technology. I'd had some exposure to Agile in my previous business partnering role, although the timing of my maternity leave at that time did sadly take me away from most of it. And when I was ready to come back to work, I was already talking to HSBC, and it sounded like I'd have a great opportunity to get involved from the beginning in their Agile and DevOps IT transformation, and on a bigger scale as well. So who doesn't want that? So sensed the challenge ahead. That was fantastic. I had no more maternity leaves planned, so decided to join. Now, as a HR business partner, you do want to get close to and understand your business, of course, as you would know. And so in addition to understanding the strategy, the why for the transformation, the levers, etc., any of the organisation design elements, I also wanted to immerse myself in Agile and DevOps themselves, because I could see that this wasn't just something for IT and it could come out into other areas of business, and I was so curious about it. So really wanted to get myself immersed into those topics. When I joined, I had a like-minded colleague also here called Tanya Spencer, who has since left about a year ago. And it was fantastic to have someone there who was of the same mind. Also, able to see the potential of Agile coming out into other areas of the business as well. Now, I'm not saying that I was prophetic in this at all. It's just that I just happened to be partnered with technology and therefore had the right exposure. If I was in a different client group, it could have been different. So just really, really lucky to have been partnered with technology, hence having this curiosity to get started with this. Now, we had a book club at that time, and Tanya recommended a book called Agile People by Pia Maria Thoren to our book club. It was just before Christmas, and my Christmas holiday in Dubai, I spent reading that book. It was a great book. And we all came back from the Christmas holidays into book club, really enthusiastic, really raring to go, and thinking about how we could start applying some of these mindsets into our own way of working. I also found that Pia Maria was running a course in Sweden, a 2-day course, and I thought, wow, yes, I'm just going to go off and do that course. And Tanya came with me, as did a couple of the HR consultants in our IT HR team at the time. We had a fantastic 2 days, networking, learning. There were really cool companies there like Spotify, ING, all these Dutch banks, really cool companies to learn from. So really fantastic. And we thought, oh, it'd be so amazing if other colleagues across HR at HSBC could also experience this course. But of course, not everyone could just go off to Sweden for 2 days doing a course. And as part of my development, I wanted to do more public speaking anyway. So we thought, Tanya and I, let's just develop our own workshop. We can do this internally, both of our development and interests. So we did. So we developed a number of iterations of the course, and word of mouth got out. One of our jokes was that our waitlist had a waitlist, and I've delivered these sessions in various locations, and it's been really fantastic to really create a movement and a mindset with your colleagues. We've used a learning platform as well called Geere. So I've got set up there a learning community on Geere with various articles in business agility, agile HR topics, and it's been really fantastic. So when we run the workshop, so this is the last bit I'll mention here, when we run the workshop and we talk about the origins of the original Agile Manifesto, and we cover the point that they talk about individuals and interactions over processes and tools. And so people are sitting in the workshop and they generally tend to have this moment of, oh, aha, it's not an IT thing. And they see that actually the Agile is actually about people. It's about respect, it's about culture, it's about values, it's about belonging. And we as people professionals are at the heart of making the employee experience fantastic.
Excellent. Okay, and it's good to see your passion coming through there, because it's clearly something that's changed how you work effectively. So, well, building on that, so what successes have you seen using Agile at HSBC? You know, a couple of examples of projects you've delivered and been involved in.
Yeah, sure. Now, the majority of our technology team have been working and delivering in this way for a number of years now. Yep, sure. So the majority of technology team have been working and delivering in this way for a number of years now, and that's really enabled them to deliver better quality work faster, which ultimately benefits our customers. As the mindset has been embedded and taken on board across various HR teams, there's been many great examples using Agile and design thinking approaches for change, process reviews, projects, ways of working, things like that. So I'll give you a couple of examples from my own team. One example of a project and one example of a cyclical process, so you can see just how versatile the approach can be. So at the end of 2017, we had our technology strategy and we were formulating our people strategy to go with that. So the strategy for 2020 effectively. And we were looking at that and we thought, well, for our projects, why not have cross-functional project teams, just like they do in Agile project teams, to deliver each initiative. And so you would have, as part of that team, the HR business partner lead, you would have a HR consultant who would kind of act like a project manager, you would have the business sponsor, so in our case, somebody from ICAgile, and then you would have relevant centre of excellence, so resourcing, performance and reward, all of the right people in the room to make the decision. So you weren't sitting there saying, oh, wouldn't it be great to do this? And, oh, we just need to go and talk to that centre of excellence now to see if it's okay, or let's go check with the business to see if that's okay. No, everyone's in the room who can make the decision. Now, one key learning from that was that possibly should have had an end user or another employee as part of that project team that might be impacted by what we're delivering. But that's just one of those things that we learn from what we're doing. So the piece that I was leading on was about talent acquisition, so a subject very close to your heart, I am sure. And the IT Exco were very, to them, talent acquisition and hiring was the most important thing that a line manager can do, because you're bringing people into the organisation to really add value to the culture, and you want people that are going to come in and really make a difference. So that was a really important piece of work for them. Now, I mentioned that we didn't have an end user in our project team, but what we did do was we would crowdsource from across the function to have people involved in building some of these initiatives. So, for example, when we built a technical interview toolkit, we crowdsourced from across the enterprise engineer faculty, because I don't know about you, but I certainly can't write a technical question and nor would I know what the answer should be. So we got the relevant people involved in that. When we built new joiner toolkits for both individual contributors and people managers, again, we sought help from relevant joiners so that we're putting relevant content out there in our products. When we were building these products, we'd make a quick prototype or minimum viable product, MVP, which is another term you would hear in Agile, and then we'd get feedback straight away and iterate, feedback and iterate, feedback and iterate. The project teams would also use tools such as Kanban and regular retrospectives as well. So the other example that I would share here is we once used Kanban to run a cyclical process. Now, coming up to the end of year, and everybody's favourite is the annual peer review. Always great to go through this process. Now, as an experiment, we decided to use Kanban to help us to run this process. So we had a workshop right at the start of the process, wrote down all of the things that we thought would happen, we're worried about, and everything in a workshop, 2 hours, post-its on the wall, and that would form our backlog. So here's one I prepared earlier. I don't know if you can see this. So anybody who is on video hopefully can see. Anybody on audio, you can see that I have like a makeshift Kanban here. So imagine a table with 3 columns. So the first column has to do. So here, this is your backlog of work. The second column is doing or work in progress, and the aim is always to minimize work in progress. And then you have done. So these are all of the things, all of the pieces of work that you've completed. Now, you would usually have a Kanban near you on your wall with post-its on, but our team are completely globally distributed, and I guess nowadays arguably everybody is globally distributed. So lucky for us, we had an online Kanban board that we were able to use. All of the people aligned to technology, so we had global business partners, regional business partners, our performance and reward all had access to the Kanban board, so there could be no surprises, no questions. Steph, where are you with that piece of work? You don't need to ask Steph, you can just go and look on the Kanban board. Oh yes, that's where she is with that piece of work. You'd be in your meeting and you would discuss only work in progress, so there was no spiral of doom with just talking about the one person's pet project or the one thing that you had to do, but you would talk about work in progress only. And also it was very visual, so no surprises. Everybody knew what they needed to do, what part they needed to play. Everybody knew that where people were with a piece of work. Also, it saves one person from being bogged down with all the actions, because you can see very clearly that the work is shared evenly, or one person has everything, so let's share it. So really, Kanban is so versatile and can be used for many things. We did hold a retrospective as well at the end, and normally you would hold retrospectives as you go along, but for this particular thing, we decided to do the retrospective at the end. The other piece is that we deliberately decided not to have somebody from the business involved in that, because it was the first time we were using it, and we didn't want to kind of any dirty laundry in front of the business, so to speak. So we kept it to the HR team only. Finally, on this point as well, what I would say is that Agile is not just about using a methodology to run a project or dumping a load of tools. Agile it's a set of beliefs, it's a culture, if you like, it's a philosophy. It's underpinned by frameworks and practices, but it's the mindset that's the most important. So you might have heard of Scrum. Scrum is an Agile framework, and I'm not intending to get into all of that nitty-gritty, but it's just something that you might have heard of. So to put into context, Scrum is an Agile framework, and it's just one of many frameworks that can be used to manage a project in an Agile way. So I just wanted to call that out. And it's really important as well to remember there's no one best way of doing it. So you could use Scrum, you could use something else, you could use Kanban as a tool, or you could use another visualization tool.
Okay, great. So really interesting examples and experiences. So how, obviously it's a big change, and for many people not accustomed to these methodologies, they've got to think how they approach the business. So how do you sell the benefits of Agile to your stakeholders in the organization? Were there any barriers of moving towards the model?
So that's a really great question, actually, Simon. And, again, I was really super lucky because I was already partnering with technology. They were already doing it, already enthusiastic. So no selling involved for me, thankfully, for that particular thing, because it had already started with them. Now, it's interesting how you say barrier, because we did have an initial barrier raised to us by somebody in the IT team who said that perhaps an Agile way of working wasn't necessarily compatible with other ways of working in the organisation at that time. So quite difficult to hear sometimes as a professional. When we started to discuss this in our team, we did find that changing habits can be really hard, and it's really taken time for us to move away from that big bang, ta-da approach and into more of a experimental and try it kind of mindset. It's really been difficult, and we have adapted and we're closer than we were, but it does take time to move into that way of working. What really helps in our organisation is that our leadership are really focused on continuous growth and learning, as are our teams, and there's a real desire to transform the way that we work to make ourselves fit for the future. A lot of focus on this at HSBC. A recent initiative, we've actually taken steps to enable all of us across the organisation to develop for future success by introducing a bank-wide learning movement called Future Skills Development. So collaboration, creativity, curiosity, all of these things are going to be major focuses of this particular initiative. And so Agile is going to become more and more important to the way we work as we move forward as a bank. If I think about others listening today that might be curious themselves, or they might be uncertain, they might think, you know, this would be great to try, but how do I convince, as you say, how do I sell the benefits to my stakeholders? I can't really think of any industry right now that hasn't been affected by recent events, that doesn't need to keep pace with the speed of today's world. If we think about how just local political events can cause trouble in another country, if you think about economic events, they happen in one country, but yet that affects another country. I don't think that anybody is immune to change happening to them and international turbulence. Think about how COVID has touched every single business. I can't think of any company that hasn't been affected, whether positively or negatively. So there's been winners and losers, of course, as they usually are. But if you can get some kind of mindset, agile mindset, it's a learning mindset, it's a change mindset. You don't even have to put the title agile on it. I can't think of any leader that wouldn't want happier employees, that wouldn't want faster business results, that wouldn't want to have delighted customers. Nobody's going to argue with that, are they? It's motherhood and apple pie, as I hear my stakeholders sometimes saying. It's just that changing behaviours can be scary. So I think that for anybody wanting to sell the benefits, it's a case of think of the business case, think of why you want to do it, think about how it might add value to your own organisation, and maybe try and experiment something small just to test the approach before you then go and approach leaders, because this kind of approach does mean that leaders need to change behaviours, which can be quite difficult.
Definitely, good point. As you say, almost a test case, really, just to begin. But okay, so in your opinion, almost taking it back a little, what does Agile HR look like? How do you begin to embed it in an organisation?
Yeah, so let's remember that that Agile is about valuing people over process. So I would start with that as the guiding principles. That's the only thing you have to think about as a guiding principle. Because generally, generally HR, we've got a reputation of being quite process heavy, admin heavy, policing. That's just how it is, sadly. How about taking a look, what I would say to people, take a look at your processes, or the processes that you've in your gift to take a look at. And what are they there to do? How many steps are in there? Are there 20 unnecessary steps in there that can be removed? Do you need the process at all? What value is that process adding? How does the end user, the employee, how do they feel when they're going through that process? Is it a great process? Have you asked them how they're feeling? Have you asked how necessary it is, and do they feel frustrated about it? Do they not? Maybe ask them how it can be improved. So it's about really involving the end user in this. Design thinking can be helpful as well to that kind of process review approach, and some of our teams have been doing that. So they've looked at design thinking for process reviews. It's an approach which is really complementary to Agile because it also puts the customer first. And again, the beauty of this is that there's no but one best way of doing it. So be curious, be open, experiment, try things, make mistakes and learn from them. The other thing that I say that people sometimes like, sometimes not, is that Agile focuses on ever improving better practice rather than just one best practice way of doing things. So if I think back, this thought was wonderfully uncomfortable for me in the beginning, because we're so used to hearing about best practice in HR and thinking, yes, best practice, we're going to implement this, we're going to be the best. But if you believe in best practice, if you believe in one best way only of doing things, then how How can you instill a culture of learning, a learning organisation? How can you believe in customer feedback, in employee feedback? Because if you've got one best way of doing things, then you're done, right?
It's true, it's true.
It's so true. And different companies will approach it in different ways. So we should absolutely take an outward look at what others are doing and be inspired by that, leverage and tweak. I do it all the time, leverage and tweak, and think about what other companies are doing. Why? How did that make them successful? Did they fail? Did they take some risks? Did they empower their teams to do it? And think about how you can do that yourself. You know, how can you really empower your team? Your team knows best how to do their job. How can you really empower them and help them to take some risks and give them that psychological safety to know that they're not going to be penalised? That's really, really important. Now, if you have an IT team and they are already working in this way, or any other team working in this way, then brilliant, you've got allies, and go talk to them, see what they're doing, observe the ceremonies, ask loads and loads of questions, be curious, see what tools they're using, how are they interacting, and you'll soon start to see the rhythm of how they are and think, you know, could this come out into other areas? If you don't have any teams working in this way, that's also fine, because there's so much information around nowadays, lots of like-minded HR professionals to connect with. I would say to look for the Agile HR community and start there. Loads of events happening. Now that everything's gone virtual, then it's easier to attend things. And personally speaking, as a mom, I wasn't able to attend the things that was just after work sometimes because I have kids to pick up. Whereas now, everything's virtual. I get to attend loads more events. I get to hear perspectives from lots of different companies and think about, you know, how could I take this approach myself? How could this be tweaked to sort my own organisational context? And also, lastly, an agile coach as well. So if all else fails, there's lots of agile coaches out there that can be super helpful too.
Well, that's great advice. So how do you structure it? How do you structure an agile HR function as a team?
So I feel like I'm a broken record because I keep saying there's no one best way of doing it, but let me try to think of some snippets of advice. There is no one best way. Every business will have a different drivers, different operating models, different imperatives, different requirements. They're in different industries. Most organisations I've worked in myself have had HR structures mirroring the business, if that makes any sense. So that's been a principle of their design, rightly or wrongly. So anybody in that situation might find it difficult then to change their entire HR structure in isolation. So it would have to be part of a wider business transformation. But there are things that you could look at and do without having to do a wholesale change. Think about how you can remove any silos. Do you have any silos at the moment that don't make any sense and mean that teams that should be talking to each other are not talking to each other? Could you introduce cross-functional working, as mentioned before? Could you simplify, could you flatten your structures and tweak some of your processes just to make them faster for your customers, for the employees? Maybe take a look at some external examples, because again, there's so many great examples out there of different structures. And when you do this, think about, okay, so that's how that HR team is structured. How is that business structured? What industry is it in? Why have they chosen that? Because it'll help you to see why they've done it that way. Because everyone likes to lift and drop the Spotify model, but that's not really, you know, how it's not going to work in every other company if you're not Spotify. Take a look at Spotify. You've also got ING Netherlands, River Island are a good example, Sky Learning Team, they've got a fantastic blog, Beyond, Zappos, Google, Netflix, so many different companies out there that you can look to get inspiration from.
Excellent. So obviously, it's a journey. I mean, what mistakes are you aware that some organisations may have made in terms of moving towards Agile HR?
Yeah, that's a great question, Simon. And learning is actually a key agile behaviour, and it's about creating that culture of learning. So taking an experimental approach generally will mean making some mistakes, and that's fine. So as I mentioned earlier, you know, we had a piece of learning in an end user could have been involved in our project team, for example. There's always going to be scenarios where, oh, you could have done that a bit better. And that's the whole point of doing retrospectives as well, which we can talk about. it's all about learning, and we need to get more comfortable with making mistakes. It feels horrible when you make a mistake, doesn't it? It's like that stress response in the brain, like, oh, I've made a mistake. But we need to get comfortable with it so that we can learn. Because the whole point of making a mistake is, okay, I made that mistake. Why did I make that mistake? How can we learn from this? And agile teams have the psychological safety to stand in a retrospective and say, you know what, that didn't work well. I made a mistake, or I think you made a mistake with that. And just having that open debate respectfully and having that safety to do so. Now, I do spend a lot of time with agile coaches. So some general mistakes that you tend to hear about, some common errors. As with any change, so not just agile, as with any change, you need to be clear about why you're doing it. So not just doing it because somebody else is doing it. Why are you doing it? And what value is it going to add? Secondly, we remember that agile is a mindset, and therefore it's behavior that needs to change. So as I mentioned before, it can be quite scary because for a leader, it means you need to relinquish some control. It means that you need to empower your teams, and giving up control for some leaders can be quite scary. And for others that, are getting comfortable with mistakes and other things, that's also quite scary. So it's behavior that needs to change, and that is really difficult to do. You can't just change job titles and bringing in a load of tools and say, woohoo, we're agile now, yay. It does require a different mindset and less command and control, less hierarchy, again, going back to the structures. And yeah, it can be really scary for people. Finally, as we said before, we can't just look at what other people are doing. So you can't just, hey, I'm going to do the Spotify model. You can't just do that. It's about leveraging what others are doing, being inspired by them and tweaking it to work for your own context and culture.
Thank you. So obviously for the people listening and watching, they're absorbing all this information and probably thinking, right, how do we start? So how would you recommend an organization takes its first steps towards an agile HR function as such?
Well, the only way to learn is to start, right? I think that we're going to understand now that there's no one best way to approach it. It does depend on the size of the organisation. Hopefully this has given people some food for thought, but it will depend on that. It will depend on the size of your HR function, the industry you're in, what the external environment is like when you're embarking on this. Will all impact on the challenge that you have ahead of you. But if this particular snippet of this conversation has piqued the curiosity of people, then I think that you can start with the mantra that I've said throughout, that agile is about valuing people over process. And as we said before, is your HR department, is your company, are you valuing your people in everything you're doing, or are there things that are hampering their productivity, hampering the culture, your behaviours? Are you embodying psychological safety? Are you allowing risks, giving that air cover to take place? It's really thinking about mindset. So we're in HR, so we're in the people business. So thinking people over process should be easy, hopefully, should be easy. Harder will be to let go of perfection, to make those mistakes. It is horrible in the beginning to not be perfectionist, to let go of that mentality of big bang delivery, to not worry too much about the best practice. It's great to think of things like good ideas and best practices, but there is no one best way of doing it. Take some risks, make some mistakes, experiment, take those experimental approaches, think about why you're doing the experiment. So what is my hypothesis for this? And you might be right or wrong, and that's completely fine. You might find a brilliant way of doing something that you'd never thought of before. But really, when you're doing that, think about how you can raise the psychological safety in your team so that people feel safe, that they have the air cover, that they're not going to be punished for taking a risk and getting it wrong. So that's the mindset change that you have to go through, and then think about your ways of working. Finally, how about using some of the tools? Try some of the tools. So if we go back to the Kanban, so why don't you and your team all go into a workshop, everybody write down on a post-it what it is they're working on currently, and then you put a little backlog in. You might find that 2 people are working on something really similar and they didn't realise, and now they can join up and not duplicate effort. You might look at the backlog and think, you know what, this is not a priority. chuck it out, let's work on something else. It can help you really prioritize and to get into that rhythm of prioritization and being quite strict with yourself in terms of not taking on every single item of work that your business is asking for, because you can't. It's completely impossible. Some things might be a higher priority than others. And then you can all celebrate when you move the card from doing into done. And the neuroscience behind that is that when you move that card along from doing to done, there's dopamine releases in the brain. So great neuroscience, it's science backed, so why not try it? The other thing that you could try is a retrospective. So as we mentioned earlier in the call, you could try doing a retrospective. Now, Agile teams do retrospectives at the end of every sprint. You don't have to do it that way. You could just do a retro right now on how you are as a team. You could do a retro on what your response to COVID has been. You could do a retro on, how have you dealt with 2020 so far? So a retrospective is, everybody is open, and I would look up on Google two things. One, the Prime Directive, because that is a statement where you're giving the psychological safety in terms of it doesn't matter what we uncover, but everybody has done their best, and we truly believe everybody has done their best. So there's no finger pointing, there's no, oh, that person's done something terrible. It's literally you all agree in the beginning that you're going to uncover some things and you're going to learn from them. So look that up, and then look up how to do a retrospective. And you could have headings such as good, bad, keep, change. Just as simple as that. What was good about what you're retroing? What was bad about it? What you're going to keep going forward, and what you're going to change. And it's just great to have that team discussion. It helps to have somebody facilitating that as well. It's completely your shout. So you could facilitate as a team, or just get one person to own that. That's fine. Now, remember that. Think about how you can use the end user as well. So not necessarily in your retro, but any of your processes, any of your initiatives, how can you get that person involved? And then, as mentioned, the only way to learn is to start. So have some fun. Have some fun with the learning that will come with this, with trying a different way of working. If you're doing this with a team, then it's great, because you can all have a laugh about, oh, I made that mistake, or, can you believe what that person said? And it is really fun when you start, but it's that bit about getting uncomfortable and unlearning. But just start now.
That's superb. Hey, brilliant. I'm already excited, and I don't know that I'll get the chance to do this. It's fantastic. But for people listening, I'm hoping they've, it's like a mini masterclass, isn't it? And a nice overview, and then a good platform to get things going. So thank you so much, Steph. It's lovely that you made time for us, and we're happy to share some of the basics of your experience. And I'm assuming, are you okay for people to reach out to you on LinkedIn? Is that the best way as they start sort of trying some of this out, if they're looking for advice? And I know you do quite a lot of this, don't you?
Always happy.
Great. I'm sure I've seen you doing a few public speaking events, as you mentioned, so they can obviously follow you and see what else you've got to build on this basics here. But thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. It's been great to catch up with you. And I'm sure we'll find time to do another one of these one day, but have a great week. I'll speak to you soon.
Thank you. Thanks, Simon. Bye.